upgrading the Arena 2021 Starter Kit decks. Hey everyone, it's VmCrew, Magic fan. I'm a fan of these starter kits. These are pretty amazing. For a very low price, I got these for like $6. You get 2 decks, 2 fully playable decks that you can also load into Arena and start battling friends and foes alike. The decks are pretty cool, pretty fun together. They've got a variety of rares, but we can make them better. We can make them more synergistic, and that's what this video is all about. Taking these decks, loading them in Arena, and I'll show you a possible deck build to make them even better. I'm focused on Historic because you have the most cards to choose from if you go into Historic, and I'll also provide you a sideboard. There's no sideboard in these. And sideboards are very important to properly battle your opponents because then you can bring in cards in between rounds to really deal with their strategies. In this video, I'll also talk about a variety of tips and tricks and concepts to building your own decks, making them stronger. But let's get on with upgrading the Arena 2021 Starter Kit decks. Alright, so I've got my Arena account loaded up right here. It looks like I've got a few challenges I need to complete. Give me all that gold. But let's go look at the upgrades for this deck. Actually, how many of my friendos are online here? I got to challenge Keeb or Angle very soon. But anyway, let's go over to my decks. And I've got them ready right here. So the red and blue one is the Rough and Tumble deck. Red and blue, also known as Izzet, also known as Prismari, is a deck that I upgraded with a focus on giants. And the green and black Golgari, aka Witherbloom deck, is the Rough and Tumble deck that I upgraded with a focus on counters. Now, both of the decks as is, they were a good starting point, but they were a bit of a mishmash of concepts. I put them together, I upgraded them in a way that they have a little bit more conceptual cohesiveness. And I think that's a great way to make a stronger Magic deck. If you synergize with your cards, if this card is related to this kind of card, related to that kind of card, putting them together in a deck gives you more synergy than a bit of a mishmash. So like, spoiler alert, the Mind Flayer card is amazing, but there's only one of them in the deck. It doesn't really synergize with anything else, so it's out of the deck. And same thing with the Rough and Tumble cards. There might be a great rare or mythic card, and it's kind of fun and splashy, but if it doesn't synergize, it's not doing the best that it could in your deck. And I think that's a lesson that beginners need to learn, that just because the card is cool and amazing might not make your deck the strongest. However, you do have to decide, how are you playing Magic? You want to have fun, you want to strategize, you want to explore archetypes, the lore, you want to win, you want to be ruthless about it, you want to be fun about it. You have to decide how you're going to play Magic before playing Magic and before upgrading your decks. These decks are a little bit higher than casual. They're not quite competitive. Competitive decks are very powerful, very expensive, very hard to play. These are higher than casual. Nothing wrong with being casual, of course. These are a little bit higher than casual because they're more focused. They're more synergistic. So let's check out the first deck here, Sneak Attack. Alright, the first big change I made was the mana base. I went with snow-covered lands. We'll see why in a moment. So for fun, I put all of the different snow-covered lands that currently exist, and I have 24 lands in total. We had 26 lands in the original build, plus Evolving Wilds for mana fixing. You're not going to need mana fixing in this. It's a very straightforward blue and red creature deck. You'll just draw the cards that you need. You'll be fine. 24 lands is all you need. 26 is a little bit more if you're playing brawl decks and the like, where you only have one of each card. Here we have multiples, so 24 lands. The Cyclone Summoner is like the big face card of the deck, and it's really cool and foily and shiny, and I like this a lot. So this is a 7/7 for 7 mana. It's a giant wizard. When it enters the battlefield, you return everything to everyone's hand. So it's a bit of a board wipe in that the only thing that'll be left on the board are giants, wizards, and lands. Hey, this deck is made out of giants, wizards, and lands. So when everything gets bounced back, you still have your big boys and girls. 1 came in the deck, I'm adding 2. Adding 4 is even better, because when you have 4 of a card, you have more probability of drawing the card, but at the very least you want 2 in the deck. I removed almost the all of the other rare cards because they just weren't synergistic. Arnie is cool, and Mind Flayer is cool, and the Archmage Emeritus is cool, but they don't quite synergize, so it's a focus on giants. So I kept the Calamity Bearer, and I put one more. Once again, if you put 4 of them, you have more probability of drawing the card, but 2 increases it better than 1. Here's a 4-mana Giant Berserker. It's a 3/4. If a giant source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage to that permanent or player instead. So once again, everything in the deck is giants. All of your giants will do double damage. So your Cyclone Summoner can do 14 damage to a player or permanent. So if you hit the opponent directly, 14 damage, or a permanent, one of their creatures, one of their planeswalkers. Calamity Bearer is amazing. So 2 of them in the deck. One of the smaller giants is the Shatter Skull Charger. It's a 3-mana, it's a rare. I put 2 of them in the deck. This is a new addition to the deck. It's got Trample and Haste. We're going to see that also Haste plays a part in this deck. So it comes in as a 4/3, ready to attack right away as a 4/3. Kicker for 2. So if you pay 2 extra mana, 3 plus the 2, you get something extra. If Shatter Skull Charger was kicked, it enters the battlefield with a +1 counter. So it comes in as a 5/4 if you pay 2 extra mana. At the beginning of your end step, if Shatter Skull Charger does not have a +1 counter on it, return it to its owner's hand. That's a long-winded way of basically saying if you didn't kick it, return it to your hand. That's fine. You're going to be able to strike in on turn 3 with this Charger. The opponent probably won't have a blocker. Even if they have a blocker, this is going to trample over it. It'll return safely back to your hand, and you'll be able to do it as many times until you get 5 mana. Love that Charger. Did you know that San Diego used to have a team called the Chargers until they abandoned us? Anyway, the next giants are the Berg Strider. 5 mana for a 4/4, it's a giant wizard. When this enters the battlefield, tap target artifact or creature an opponent controls. If snow mana was spent to cast this spell, that permanent does not untap during its controller's next untap step. That's one of the reasons why I changed the mana base to snow-covered basics. So when you spend mana to summon this Bergy boy over here, it's going to tap their creature or their artifact, and it won't untap for 1 whole turn. They're going to lose it for 1 turn. Even if you don't upgrade the deck with snow lands, Berg Strider will still tap them down for this 1 turn, so you can go in with your Alpha Strike. 4 of them in the deck, so you can make sure that you actually draw it. Rime Shield Frost Giant. 5 mana 4/5 with Ward 3. Here's the new ability, Ward. Whenever a permanent with Ward becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it, unless that player pays the Ward cost. So this has an automatic counter spell built into it, so the opponent has to pay 3 more mana or the spell will fizzle. And you're going to see many rage quits when the opponent realizes that they don't have enough mana to take out this Frost Giant, because it's a 4/5. There's 4 of them in the deck. And then the last big giant, this is an uncommon, there's 4 of them. When Doomscar Titan enters the battlefield, all creatures you control get the +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Now I wish Magic would kind of reword some of these cards that they make, because I really wish they would use the templating of all creatures you control get +1. I know that if you played for a long time, it's obvious what that means, but I think for a lot of beginner players, you have to be a little bit more obvious, and I don't think that's a big change to make to this. Everyone would be happy. When this enters the battlefield, all creatures you control get +1 and gain haste. Anyway, you can foretell it. So instead of paying 6 mana, you can pay 5 mana. You first put it away in the foretell zone for 2 mana. On your turn, pay 2 mana, and then on a later turn, you can cast this for 1 mana reduction. Since it's in a hidden zone, the opponent will not know what is there. They'll be trembling in their boots about what is coming, what prophecy will come to light. And eventually, Doomscar Titan will fulfill the prophecy. Now, the deck had the Axguard Cavalry, which gave a creature haste. It was a creature that you would tap to give another creature haste. I want more of that, but I'm going to go with the Crashing Drawbridge instead of the Axguard Cavalry. It's got a better block than the Cavalry. It's got the same ability to give creature haste. Actually, gives all your creatures haste. So the Cavalry would only target 1 giant at a time. You've got this drawbridge, you've got a great blocker, and then when you summon some of these other bigger giants without haste, you can give him haste. Amazing. Along those same lines, I've also got Tuk Tuk Rubble Fort. 3 mana for a 0/3. Defender cannot attack, just like the Crashing Drawbridge, but it's got reach, so it can swat out flyers from the air. A lot of times people don't realize that, but this can also block flyers. And this just automatically, at all times, creatures you control have haste. So whereas with the drawbridge you have to wait one whole turn, because of summoning sickness, to activate haste, this one's got it built in right away as soon as you summon it for 3 mana. So you can even haste in this Doomscar Titan and the like. Amazing. And then I'm keeping the Run Amok because for 2 mana, your creature gets +3/+3, and it gains Trample to put the final bit of damage over the creature's head directly to the opponent. I'm also keeping the Thundering Rebuke, 2 mana sorcery. It deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Perhaps the opponent has a lot of defenses to protect their planeswalker. But what about a direct 4 damage right out of this Rebuke? Or take out one of their creatures and then attack the planeswalker, even better. And lastly, Frostbite. 1 red mana will deal 2 damage to a creature or planeswalker. If you control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage instead. So because the mana base is made out of snow permanents, you should have no problem casting the Frostbite for its extra bit of damage, 1 red mana to deal 3 damage. We haven't had that since the days of Lightning Bolt of yore. Ah, the good old days. Alright, let's look at the sideboard, because sideboards are very important to alter your deck to meet the specific challenges of your opponent, especially on Arena where you get randomly paired with opponents. You can have better success against them in a best-of-3 game when you bring in cards from your sideboard to replace cards that might not be as effective against a certain opponent. So here's the sideboard. Soul Guide Lantern to deal with opponents' graveyards. There's opponents out there that really rely on their graveyards to mess you up, like a Kroxa deck and the like. Mess them up by casting the Soul Guide Lantern. The moment it enters the battlefield, you can exile 1 thing out of their graveyard, never to return. Goodbye, Kroxa. If you need to, then tap it, and then just simply exile everything out of their graveyard. If you don't quite need to exile their graveyard, you can just sacrifice this for 1 mana and draw a card, 2 of them in the sideboard. Sorcerer's Spyglass to deal with opponents that have a lot of planeswalkers. For 2 mana, you get an artifact where you get to look at the opponent's hand, so you see everything that's coming. And then you get to select the name of that planeswalker, and they are rendered inoperable. Their loyalty abilities do not work. This also works for anything else with activated abilities, except mana abilities. So mana rocks and lands, this will not affect, but anything else that has an activated ability, where you tap it or you pay some sort of mana, anything with something : something else that's an activated ability, Sorcerer's Spyglass shuts it down. So after you see your opponent has a bunch of activated ability cards, Spyglass can shut it down. Perhaps the opponent is playing with a lot of mana dorks, maybe an elf deck, where they want to ramp into some big creatures. Well, it's going to be hard for them to ramp into their big creatures if their little creatures are dead. So Cinderclasm, 2 mana, instant, deals 1 damage to each creature, so goodbye all those Llanowar elves. If you pay 1 more mana, Cinderclasm deals 2 damage to all of those creatures instead. So what about if the opponent's got a lot of 1/1 creatures that they want to eventually overrun you with? Cinderclasm them out of here. If the opponent has bigger creatures that we need to deal with, Storm's Wrath, 4 mana, deals 4 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. So it also hits their walkers if they're playing a Super Friends deck or a go-wide deck. So that's the sideboard and the main deck of the Sneak Attack upgrade. Oh, one more thing, don't forget to upgrade your sleeves to the really cool Prismari sleeves. That'll really make your opponent quake in their boots. For the second deck, the Rough and Tumble deck, I changed this to focus on counters. No, not counter spells, but counters and proliferate. Let's check it out. First of all, before I forget, make sure you've got the Witherbloom sleeves set up in your deck. Look at that, looks so cool, so green. As for the deck itself, well, I took my cue from the Dragon Guard Elite. There was only 1 in the deck, I put 1 more. This is a 2/2 for 2 mana, Human Druid, Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, put a +1 counter on this. So we'll see we've got a few instants and sorceries. This Elite will get bigger. Eventually it'll get really big because for 6 mana, double the number of +1s on the Elite. So that gave me the idea to upgrade this deck to focus on counters, creatures with counters, and then ways to put more counters on your creatures. In this deck I did keep most of the rares. I kept the Oran Reef. Is that Reef or Ryef? Oran Ryef? Or Oran Reef, or did someone spell that wrong? Oran Ryef Ooze. 3 mana, 2/2. It's an ooze. When this enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on target creature you control, such as itself or the Dragon Guard Elite. When this attacks, put a +1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1. So our strategy is going to have a bunch of creatures with +1 counters. They attack, they all automatically get bigger. So we got 2 of them in the deck. More is more good. I kept the Cragplate Baloth and added 1 more. 7 mana for 6/6, hexproof, haste. So that's a lot of mana to get a very big creature that is going to be hard to deal with. But wait a minute, pay 3 more mana, and you add +4/+4. 4 +1 counters. You get a 10/10 for 10 mana, yeah. But obviously if the game goes long, this Baloth is going to save your hide. Hexproof, haste, uncounterable, get on my squad. Dauntless Survivor is a good card to keep. It's 2 mana, it's a 1/1, it's a human wizard. When the senders put a +1 counter on anything. On this creature itself or one of your other creatures, and again with the Rife, it will synergize because then it'll get bigger and bigger as everything attacks. Gnarlid Colony, it's a 2/2 for 2, but if you kick it, it'll enter with 2 +1 counters. And what's this? Each creature you control with a +1 has Trample. This is a common. It's 4 of them in the deck. So big creatures are great, but if they get blocked by a 1/1 creature, that's not so great. So with the Gnarlid Colony, give all your creatures Trample. Love it. Scavenging Ooze is another cool ooze to add to the deck, especially this hideous alternate art. Alright, 2 mana, 2/2, it's a rare, pay a green. This is an activated ability. Exile target card from any graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1 counter on the ooze and you gain 1 life. So you're gonna be eating the stuff in your opponent's graveyard, making this ooze larger. You could eat something in your own graveyard if you want, if you need it, and then the ooze gets larger. More +1 counters is good. Well, how do we get more +1 counters onto our beasties? How about the Pollen Bright Druid? 2 mana, you get a 1/1 Elf Druid. When it enters, choose 1. Put a +1 counter on a creature, nice. Or Proliferate, nicer. What is Proliferate? Basically add 1 more counter on something of yours that already has a counter. But anyway, you're going to be proliferating upon your creatures that already have +1 counters, or adding creatures, and since there's 4 of these in the deck, you'll be able to do why not both as you draw them. And the other amazing way to proliferate even more is the Evolution Sage. This is an Elf Druid, it's a 3/2 for 3 mana. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, hey, landfall, proliferate. So whenever you trigger landfall, add more counters. In real life, this uncommon card is getting a little bit pricey because it's a really cool effect. On Arena, where it's all digital, well, you crack a couple of uncommon wild cards and you got the card. So, because this is an older card, it doesn't say landfall. And speaking of lands, here's our mana base. 10 swamps, 10 forests. I went with some cool vintage Mirage lands. And I kept the 4 Evolving Wilds. This will trigger landfall twice. This is a land. If you've got the Evolution Sage out there, you play this, it proliferates, it's a land, and then you sacrifice it to go get another land directly into play. That's another proliferate. Evolution Sage is really gonna do its thing with the plain old common Evolving Wilds. So the deck's not all just creatures and proliferate, we've got to deal with the opponent's things. So, keeping the Rabid Bite, 4 of these, sorcery, target creature you control, deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So your creature will directly bite the opponent's creature, hopefully taking it out. Or maybe after some sort of attack and weakening a creature, do the final Rabid Bite. This is a sorcery. This is going to trigger Magecraft for the elite to get even larger. Power Word Kill will also trigger Magecraft. 2 mana, instant, destroy target non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon creature. There's a lot of stipulations here, and sometimes the opponent will have a dragon that you can't deal with, unfortunately. But I think 2 mana to instantly kill almost everything. If the random pairing system doesn't mess with you, they should be able to take care about just anything you want. If you want to feel safer, put in just good old murder, it'll do the same thing. But one way to make more focused, more powerful decks is to find the lower cost versions of cards. Murder for 3 mana will destroy anything, no stipulation, but it's 3 mana. If you have the lower cost 2 mana, Power Word Kill, and you've got 4 mana, well, you're able to do 1 murder and have 1 mana left over, or do 2 Power Word Kills and efficiently use all your mana. That's the next level of being able to make more powerful decks, mana efficiency. And one of the most mana-efficient kill spells out there is Fatal Push. 1 black mana, instantly destroy any creature. unless its mana value is 2 or less. So it'll get rid of a bunch of small, efficient creatures that the opponent has. But wait a minute, Revolt. This card is revolting. Destroy that creature if it has mana value of 4 or less, instead, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. Now, what you could do is, you play your Evolving Wilds, you crack it to go get that land, this left the battlefield, that will trigger Revolt, and then you'll be able to kill your opponent's 4 mana creature. And this is all instant, so you can do the Evolving Wilds on the opponent's turn, you left the battlefield on that turn, and then you can Fatal Push. Most people use this as one of their own creatures died, so Fatal Push Revolted. Let's look at the sideboard. So again, these are the various ways to deal with various types of opponents. I've got again the Soul Guide Lantern to deal with opponents that have graveyard shenanigans, the Sorcerer's Spyglass to again deal with Super Friends Planeswalker decks. I've got a Bontu's Last Reckoning if I need to wipe the board, if the opponent's making lots of creatures, lots of tokens. 3 mana destroys everything. Be careful though, because then your lands do not untap until your next turn, so be mana efficient about that. For 4 mana, instead you could do the Extinction Event, so once again, if your opponent's creating a lot of tokens, Extinction Event will wipe them all out, because 0 is even. Exile everything that is of mana value, even or odd. Unless it's a copy of a token, like when the Scute Swarm gets out of control, those are tokens, but have a copy of the original Scute Mama, which is an odd mana cost of 3, so be careful. Get rid of all those Scutes before they started to copy themselves, rather than just the 0 mana value Scute. If the opponent has a variety of enchantments we need to get rid of, Feed the Swarm will be able to let you do that. You lose a little bit of life, but you'll be able to target whatever you want, Feed the Swarm. 2 Thoughtseizes in order to get out of their hand on turn 1 the annoying stuff that they may have. You lose a little life, no big deal, but you see what's in their hand and you remove the problem card. People hate this card and I love it. At 7 mana, we've got the Meteor Golem, which will let you destroy any non-land permanent, Planeswalker, enchantment, creature, anything that's kind of out of your grasp. Meteor Golem will strike the ground and wipe out that non-land permanent. And lastly, Grim Tutor, to be able to go get what you need at the moment that you need it. You pay 3 life, 3 mana, you get the card that you need. Take care of anything you want. And that's the new Rough and Tumble deck. It's got to focus on creatures with counters, with Proliferate, some cool removal spells, and a sideboard to help out against opponents. And that was my upgrade. What did you think? Did I make the decks better than ever? Do you have ideas of how to improve them? Tell me about it in the comments. I would really appreciate it. Was there a card or 2 that I missed? What about a very cool mythic that would have made the deck even better? More mythics and more rares makes the deck more good, but it makes it more expensive, so think about that. And the decks that I built here could work great in Paper or Arena. If you go beyond Arena to the full set of cards that exist in the world of Magic, all 25,000 cards, how would you improve the deck? How would you upgrade it with the full history of Magic cards that exist? Tell me about it in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, consider pressing the join button right here in YouTube, or heading over to the Patreon, patreon.com/VmCampos. You'll get exclusive stuff if you go to the Patreon, but you'll also show me that you really appreciate my hard work in making these decks, these videos, all of this content, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. I would really appreciate it if you pledge to the VmCrew and help support the channel. If you can't quite pledge at the moment, no worries, simply like, comment, share, subscribe, battle the Minotaur, do all that good stuff. I would really appreciate it. This has been VmCampos, and I'll see you in the next upgrade video.